The gala had shifted into its evening rhythm, soft laughter and gentle conversations weaving through the space. Yet for Olivia Turner, the room felt both expansive and confining at the same time. She moved carefully along the perimeter, observing the interactions of those whose lives were defined by influence and money, noting the subtle exchanges, the way hands lingered over champagne flutes, as if measuring power rather than enjoying the drink. The string quartet had shifted to a slower piece, each note curling through the golden light, and Olivia felt the pulse of the room, sensing the undertones of strategy hidden beneath polite smiles. Ethan Caldwell had descended from the staircase, his movement fluid, almost predatory in its precision, yet tempered by an elegance that commanded attention without demanding it. His gaze sought, calculated, yet it returned to Olivia again and again, lingering just long enough to be noticed, yet not so long as to betray the depth of his thoughts. She felt it, the weight of observation, and allowed a subtle adjustment of her posture, a slight tilt of her chin that spoke of awareness and self-possession. A server passed nearby, and Olivia caught the reflection of the chandelier in the polished surface of a silver tray, the light fracturing into tiny prisms that mirrored the careful balance of attention and intention in the room. Ethan's approach was deliberate, measured, every step across the marble floor echoing softly, a rhythm that seemed to blend with the music. When he was only a few feet away, their eyes met once more, and the tension that had been simmering beneath the surface crystallized into something palpable, a quiet electricity of recognition and curiosity. Olivia's lips curved into a controlled smile, acknowledging the connection without offering more than was necessary, and Ethan allowed a fraction of a smile to appear, the corner of his mouth lifting ever so slightly, a signal that the calculated man behind the empire was stirred by her presence. They moved through the gala like two satellites in a carefully choreographed orbit, their interactions brief yet loaded with significance, a glance here, a slight shift in stance there, each gesture a subtle negotiation of power and awareness. As the evening deepened, conversations around them blurred into a soft hum, the chandeliers casting shifting patterns of light across the room, highlighting the textures of silk and satin, the glint of jewelry, the confident lines of those accustomed to command. Olivia excused herself for a moment to the balcony, where the cool night air offered a contrast to the warmth inside. The city stretched beneath her in a tapestry of lights and movement, and she inhaled slowly, grounding herself in the clarity of the moment. Ethan followed, maintaining a discreet distance, yet the precision in the set of his shoulders and the unwavering focus of his eyes betrayed his attention. She leaned on the railing, feeling the night breeze lift a strand of her hair, and Ethan stepped closer, close enough for the warmth of his presence to be felt without intrusion. Their conversation began with neutral observations, a comment on the cityscape, a remark about the gala itself, but beneath each word lay an unspoken assessment, a dance of intellect and poise that neither could afford to lose. Olivia found herself unexpectedly intrigued, noting the meticulous care in his choice of words, the subtle authority in his tone, and the way he listened not just to respond, but to understand. Ethan, in turn, recognized a rare blend of composure and perceptiveness in her, a capacity to navigate a world foreign to her background with dignity and insight, and it drew him further into a space where control and obsession began to intermingle quietly. They returned to the main hall, walking side by side, each movement synchronized without overt coordination, and the room seemed to bend subtly around them, the ambient light and music framing their emerging connection. In that space, amidst the swirl of elegance and expectation, a subtle shift had occurred, one that neither had fully acknowledged, yet both were keenly aware of. A bond had begun to form, tempered by curiosity, tension, and the faintest spark of fascination, promising a series of encounters that would test their limits, challenge assumptions, and slowly, inexorably, draw them together. The soft hum of conversation continued around them as Olivia Turner and Ethan Caldwell moved through the gala, each step deliberate, each glance purposeful. Olivia's eyes scanned the room with quiet awareness, noting the subtle interactions between guests, the way a slight nod could shift influence, and the way a smile could veil intention. Ethan's attention never wavered, his eyes following her with a controlled curiosity that hinted at both assessment and fascination. They found a quieter corner near a sweeping staircase, where the lights softened and the sounds of the main hall became a gentle murmur behind them. Olivia allowed herself a slow exhale, the weight of the evening pressing lightly on her shoulders, and Ethan mirrored her motion with a subtle lean against the polished banister, his presence commanding yet restrained. The chandeliers above caught in his tailored suit, reflecting fragments of golden light across the marble floor, and he noted how her posture spoke of composure, resilience, and an unspoken confidence that few could maintain in such an environment. A string of polite introductions had been made, small talk exchanged, yet beneath every word lay a current of mutual calculation, each aware of the unspoken dynamics shaping the space around them. Olivia tilted her head slightly, acknowledging a passing comment from a socialite with a graceful nod, and Ethan's eyes tracked her fluid movement, noting the rhythm of her gestures, the subtle interplay between restraint and attention. They exchanged a brief smile, a silent acknowledgement that neither was unaware of the growing tension, the undercurrent of connection threading between them. The music shifted again, a delicate piano piece weaving through the ambient chatter, and Olivia's gaze wandered to the sweeping view of the city beyond the ballroom windows, the lights stretching like constellations across the skyline, a reminder of the magnitude of the world they both navigated. Ethan followed her glance, the cityscape a backdrop for the complexities of the evening, and in that moment, the interplay of ambition, expectation, and awareness settled into a rhythm that was uniquely theirs. He commented lightly on the view, his tone measured, precise, each word chosen to invite thought without intrusion, and Olivia responded with equal care, her voice steady, conveying observation and intelligence rather than compliance. Their dialogue continued, a series of careful exchanges that revealed as much in pauses and inflection as in the words themselves, each recognizing the subtle dance of presence and influence, of curiosity and restraint. As the evening wore on, a server passed with a tray of sparkling water, the reflections of the chandeliers dancing across the glasses, and Olivia caught the movement with a practiced eye, noting the way light and shadow played across the room. Ethan allowed a fraction of a smile to cross his face, small and almost imperceptible, acknowledging the quiet confidence she projected, the way she navigated a world not entirely her own with grace and acuity. They moved back into the main hall, their paths weaving seamlessly through clusters of guests, each aware of the subtle shifts in attention that followed them, each understanding the silent negotiations of presence, influence, and observation. Olivia felt the pull of anticipation, a gentle tension threading through her, and Ethan, aware of her reaction, adjusted his pace just enough to maintain the balance between distance and connection. The gala continued around them, but in that orbit, time seemed to stretch, the music, the light, and the soft murmur of conversation blending into a framework for a connection that was unfolding deliberately, purposefully, and with an unspoken promise of further encounters that would challenge, intrigue, and subtly bind them together over the course of the evening. The final hours of the gala unfolded with a gentle crescendo, the string quartet's melodies winding through the grand ballroom, and mingling with the soft murmur of conversations that carried both anticipation and subtle calculation. Olivia Turner stood near a grand window, the city lights spilling over her features and catching the delicate shimmer of her emerald green dress, a quiet testament to her presence amid the swirl of opulence around her. She watched as Ethan Caldwell approached once more, his posture flawless, movements measured, yet there was an unmistakable shift in his demeanor, a subtle warmth breaking through the habitual control that defined him. The soft clink of glasses and muted laughter seemed to fade around them, leaving a space in which observation and awareness became a conversation of their own. Ethan's eyes traced the lines of her profile, noting the way her hands rested lightly against the marble railing, the deliberate poise with which she carried herself, each gesture a reflection of composure honed through experience and resilience. He spoke first, his voice low and precise, drawing her attention without disrupting the gentle rhythm of the evening. Olivia responded with equal care, a subtle acknowledgement of the unspoken dialogue that existed between them, each word chosen to convey thoughtfulness and insight rather than casual courtesy. They moved together along the balcony, the ambient glow of the city providing a backdrop to their measured exchange, the patterns of light from the skyscrapers creating shifting shadows that mirrored the complexity of the tension between them. Their conversation, though seemingly mundane at first glance, was laden with nuance, each remark a balance of intellect, curiosity, and subtle challenge. Olivia noted the precision in Ethan's diction, the careful cadence that gave weight to even the simplest observation, and found herself intrigued by the layers beneath his composed exterior. Ethan, in turn, recognized in her a rare combination of grace and discernment, the ability to navigate a world of influence and expectation without compromise to her integrity, and it drew his attention more deeply than he expected. As they returned to the main hall, they passed clusters of guests engaged in animated discussion, yet the space between Olivia and Ethan felt distinct, almost private in its significance, a bubble of awareness that neither had consciously created, yet both navigated instinctively. The chandeliers above caught in the polished surfaces around them, scattering light in patterns that danced across the room, emphasizing the contrast between the public spectacle and the intimate tension developing between the two. Each movement, each gesture, each carefully considered word reinforced the silent negotiation of attention, curiosity, and unspoken acknowledgement, a delicate interplay of control and fascination that neither had anticipated yet could not ignore. Olivia felt a quiet thrill at the realization that every step, every glance, every subtle shift in conversation carried weight, and Ethan, aware of her attentiveness, allowed a hint of a smile, an almost imperceptible signal of approval and intrigue. In the midst of the gala's orchestrated elegance, a foundation was being laid, subtle yet deliberate, for encounters and interactions that promised to unfold with increasing intensity, revealing layers of personality, strategy, and emerging connection. The night continued, the ambient music, the flowing conversations, and the shimmering light all forming a stage for the delicate dance between observation, awareness, and the first stirrings of a bond that would grow and transform as the evening progressed, quietly promising challenges, curiosity, and a slowly emerging fascination that neither Olivia nor Ethan could yet fully name or resist. The evening air had grown cooler as Olivia Turner and Ethan Caldwell lingered in a quieter section of the grand ballroom, the soft hum of conversation now punctuated by occasional laughter that echoed against the marble walls. Olivia adjusted the strap of her dress, the emerald fabric catching the chandelier light and scattering subtle reflections across the polished floor, and she felt the weight of observation like a tangible presence, Ethan's eyes following her movements with an intensity that neither needed words to convey. He approached with measured steps, each one deliberate, the sound of his polished shoes against the marble a soft, steady rhythm that seemed to blend with the music, a subtle accompaniment to the unspoken dialogue unfolding between them. Olivia turned slightly, offering him a composed smile, her gaze steady yet inquisitive, aware that the balance of power and attention in this moment was delicate and significant. Ethan's expression softened ever so slightly, the rigid control he usually maintained giving way to a hint of fascination, a careful acknowledgement of the poise and confidence she carried effortlessly. They moved together through the space, navigating between clusters of guests with a shared awareness, each gesture and glance an unspoken negotiation of presence, curiosity, and restraint. The light from the chandeliers created shifting patterns on the marble floor, fractals that mirrored the subtle dynamics at play between them, the interplay of attention, observation, and emerging connection forming a rhythm that was uniquely theirs. Olivia's thoughts were deliberate, noting the way Ethan's posture conveyed both authority and restraint, the way his eyes followed hers with a mix of assessment and intrigue, and she found herself responding with equal precision, each movement and glance conveying awareness without revealing more than necessary. The orchestra shifted to a slower, more contemplative piece, the notes curling through the air like a gentle current, and Olivia felt the atmosphere wrap around them, a cocoon of elegance, expectation, and unspoken potential. Ethan commented lightly on the composition, his voice measured, articulate, each word carefully chosen to engage without imposing, and Olivia responded in kind, her observations precise, insightful, and subtly challenging, reinforcing the quiet tension threading between them. As they moved closer to the balcony, the city lights beyond the windows stretched in a tapestry of brilliance, reflecting the magnitude of both the world they inhabited and the possibilities unfolding in their interaction. Ethan allowed a brief pause, a moment for observation, before speaking again, his tone carrying both attention and a restrained warmth, an acknowledgement of the subtle influence she had on him. Olivia responded with composure, her voice even, measured, acknowledging his presence while maintaining her own agency, each word a balance of engagement and independence. The movement back into the main hall was fluid, their steps coordinated without conscious effort, the surrounding guests fading into a backdrop against the quiet focus they shared. Every subtle gesture, every measured glance, reinforced the undercurrent of connection, the developing awareness of mutual respect, curiosity, and intrigue, laying the groundwork for encounters that would test boundaries, deepen observation, and slowly evolve into a bond defined by attention, fascination, and a shared understanding of presence and poise. In the midst of the gala's orchestrated elegance, the rhythm of their interaction became a narrative in itself, a silent dialogue of power, awareness, and anticipation, each moment threading seamlessly into the next, quietly promising further discoveries, challenges, and the gradual emergence of something neither had fully anticipated yet both were compelled to navigate. The gala had begun to wind down, the soft strains of the string quartet giving way to a gentle hush as guests drifted toward exit points or smaller conversation clusters, leaving pockets of quiet space where presence and attention could be measured without distraction. Olivia Turner remained near the grand staircase, her posture poised, eyes scanning the remaining crowd with a calm awareness, the emerald shimmer of her dress catching the last of the chandelier light in subtle flashes. Ethan Caldwell approached with the same measured precision that had defined his movements all evening, his eyes reflecting both focus and a quiet intensity that drew attention despite his composed exterior. He did not speak immediately, allowing a moment of space, a silent acknowledgement of her presence and the weight of observation between them. Olivia met his gaze steadily, a subtle nod of recognition and awareness, signaling both her attentiveness and her understanding of the nuanced dynamics unfolding. The ambient light from the chandeliers shifted as the evening grew later, highlighting the polished marble floors and casting gentle reflections across the space, accentuating the interplay of movement and stillness that defined their interaction. Their conversation began in small increments, deliberate and carefully measured, each sentence weighted with consideration, each pause intentional, conveying curiosity, evaluation, and the quiet beginnings of trust. Olivia commented on a distant point of interest, a detail in the architecture or the fading patterns of light across the cityscape seen through the windows, and Ethan responded with precision, his words crafted to acknowledge observation while maintaining a composed neutrality, the undercurrent of fascination threading through every exchange. As they walked slowly through the ballroom, navigating between small groups of guests, the subtle alignment of their steps mirrored the alignment of their attention, a rhythm of movement that neither needed to coordinate verbally, yet flowed naturally, reinforcing the emerging connection between them. The soft hum of conversation around them continued, punctuated by the occasional clink of glasses, yet the space they inhabited felt increasingly distinct, a zone of interaction where subtlety, presence, and awareness carried more weight than words alone. Olivia allowed herself to feel the undercurrent of attention, noting the careful assessment in Ethan's expression and the controlled yet unmistakable way he registered her observations and reactions. Ethan, in turn, recognized the poise, composure, and quiet confidence that Olivia projected, qualities that set her apart in a room dominated by influence and expectation, drawing him deeper into observation and reflection. They paused briefly near the balcony, where the cool night air mingled with the residual warmth from the ballroom, and the city lights below stretched endlessly, a tapestry of brilliance and movement. Olivia leaned slightly against the railing, her hands resting lightly, and Ethan adjusted his stance to maintain presence without intrusion, the shared space charged with silent acknowledgement, curiosity, and anticipation. Their dialogue remained subtle, an exchange of observations, insights, and thoughtfulness that communicated as much in its restraint as in its content, each aware of the influence, presence, and emerging fascination in the other. As the final guests began to depart, the chandeliers casting soft golden reflections across the floors, the tension and awareness between Olivia and Ethan lingered, forming a quiet prelude to the encounters, challenges, and subtle unfolding of a bond that promised to deepen, expand, and evolve in ways that neither could yet fully anticipate, a rhythm of power, presence, and intrigue quietly setting the stage for what was to come. The evening had taken on a quieter cadence, the last of the gala's guests drifting toward the exits while the chandeliers cast a softer, warmer glow across the polished marble floors. Olivia Turner remained near the edge of the room, her posture composed, her hands lightly resting on the railing of a side balcony, her eyes scanning the remaining figures with a mix of awareness and calm calculation. Ethan Caldwell approached her with measured steps, the familiar precision in his movement softened by the subtle intrigue that had begun to surface over the course of the evening. He stopped just a few feet away, allowing the distance to maintain a sense of propriety while his gaze lingered on her. Taking in the quiet confidence she radiated in the midst of the fading activity around them. Olivia turned slightly, acknowledging him with a subtle nod and a composed smile, her expression inviting observation without offering vulnerability. The ambient music from the distant string quartet had softened to a gentle background hum, and the chandeliers above refracted the light in delicate patterns, casting elongated reflections across the marble that seemed to mirror the tension and curiosity between them. Ethan spoke first, his voice calm, articulate, each word deliberate, acknowledging her presence and engagement without imposing, and Olivia responded with a measured tone, each sentence carefully balanced between intellect, observation, and subtle challenge. As they moved together along the balcony, their steps almost instinctively synchronized, the flow of their movements creating a quiet rhythm in which observation, assessment, and emerging fascination intertwined seamlessly. Olivia's gaze drifted to the city skyline beyond the expansive windows, the urban lights stretching in a glittering expanse, and she allowed a brief moment to appreciate the contrast between the vastness of the world outside and the concentrated intensity of the interaction within the gala. Ethan followed her glance, his eyes reflecting not just the lights of the city but the recognition of her composure, intelligence, and the subtle authority she carried in a room not built for her comfort, a recognition that stirred both curiosity and an unspoken desire to understand the dimensions of her presence more fully. Their conversation continued, punctuated by thoughtful pauses and careful phrasing, the exchange revealing as much in what was left unsaid as in the articulate observations they shared, each acutely aware of the weight of presence, perception, and influence in the space they occupied. Olivia noticed the subtle shifts in Ethan's stance, the minute changes in expression that suggested a deepening engagement, a careful calculation tempered by intrigue, and she allowed a fraction of a smile, a quiet acknowledgement of the dynamic developing between them. The soft hum of the remaining guests, the gentle clinking of glassware, and the shifting patterns of chandelier light formed a delicate backdrop against which their interaction unfolded, creating a space where attention, anticipation, and mutual assessment defined the rhythm of their encounter. As they returned to the main hall, the space around them seemed to contract and expand in subtle ways, framing each glance, each measured word, and each poised movement with an elegance that made the ordinary remarkable. Every gesture, every pause, every careful choice of phrasing contributed to a growing awareness of connection, curiosity, and quiet fascination, a tension that was both controlled and undeniable, laying the foundation for encounters yet to come, where observation, engagement, and the slow emergence of mutual respect and intrigue would continue to shape the delicate and compelling dynamic between Olivia Turner and Ethan Caldwell. The gala was drawing toward its final hours, the remaining guests lingering in small clusters while the soft glow from the chandeliers softened the edges of the grand room. Olivia Turner remained composed, her posture upright, her hands lightly resting against the railing near the balcony as she observed the shifting dynamics of the space, noting who lingered, who departed, and the subtle exchanges of attention among the few remaining attendees. Ethan Caldwell approached once more, his presence calm, yet commanding, his eyes tracking her movements with an intensity tempered by deliberate restraint. He paused just behind her, allowing her to sense his proximity without imposing, the slight shift in his stance signaling awareness, focus, and a measured curiosity that had grown steadily throughout the evening. Olivia adjusted the drape of her dress, the emerald fabric catching the ambient light and reflecting a soft glow, and she tilted her head slightly, acknowledging him with a subtle nod that conveyed both recognition and measured intrigue. The faint murmur of departing conversations, punctuated by the distant clink of glasses, created a gentle background rhythm against which the interaction between them unfolded, each word and gesture carefully balanced to convey observation, interest, and awareness without revealing the depths of thought beneath. Ethan spoke first, his voice low and deliberate, noting a detail about the city lights beyond the expansive windows, his words crafted to engage without dominating, to invite dialogue rather than impose direction. Olivia responded with precision, her tone calm, her words carefully chosen to reflect both observation and insight, allowing the exchange to remain a conversation of awareness, curiosity, and subtle acknowledgement. They moved slowly along the balcony, their steps naturally aligned, creating a rhythm of presence, attentiveness, and quiet fascination, each moment layering additional depth into the unspoken connection developing between them. The city lights stretched endlessly beyond the windows, a backdrop of brilliance and movement that contrasted with the controlled and deliberate space they maintained around one another, highlighting the significance of each glance, each subtle gesture, and each measured phrase. Olivia noted the careful attention Ethan paid to her, the way his gaze shifted and lingered in precise intervals, and she allowed herself to respond with equally subtle cues of awareness, a fraction of a smile, a controlled shift in posture, a slight tilt of the chin, all signaling attentiveness and confidence. Ethan, in turn, registered these cues with an acute perception, each small movement, each measured glance reinforcing his growing recognition of her presence, poise, and composure, qualities that distinguished her in a room defined by influence, power, and expectation. As they returned to the main hall, the few remaining guests and the lingering light framed their interaction, the space around them simultaneously public and intimate, each step, each word, and each gesture reinforcing the tension, curiosity, and mutual assessment that had been building throughout the evening. The chandeliers above continued to cast soft golden reflections across the marble floors, illuminating the subtle dance of observation, response, and emerging connection between Olivia Turner and Ethan Caldwell, a rhythm of engagement that promised further moments of insight, challenge, and growing fascination, quietly setting the stage for the next phase of their evolving dynamic. The gala had finally quieted, the ebbing footsteps of departing guests echoing softly against the high ceilings while the last flickers of golden light from the chandeliers reflected across the marble floors. Olivia Turner remained composed, standing near a wide window that framed the city skyline like a constellation of glittering promise, her hands resting lightly against the railing as she surveyed the emptier ballroom with calm awareness. Ethan Caldwell approached from behind, his presence deliberate, measured, yet carrying a subtle warmth that had begun to emerge over the course of the evening. He stopped just a step or two away, allowing space for propriety while maintaining a silent focus, his gray eyes tracing her movements with quiet fascination. Olivia turned slightly to acknowledge him with a controlled smile, her expression conveying poise and alert curiosity without yielding any vulnerability. The faint hum of the remaining orchestral music and the soft clinking of glassware formed a gentle backdrop, emphasizing the significance of each gesture and glance shared between them. Ethan spoke softly, his voice carrying clarity and precision, commenting on a subtle detail in the cityscape visible through the window, an observation meant to invite engagement without dominance, and Olivia responded with equal care, her tone steady, each word deliberate, conveying observation and insight while maintaining a quiet authority. As they moved along the balcony together, their steps instinctively aligned, creating a rhythm that was both deliberate and natural, each step a continuation of the subtle dialogue unfolding in posture, glance, and expression. Olivia felt the quiet tension of the moment, a careful balance of awareness, curiosity, and recognition, and she allowed a fraction of a smile, a small but deliberate signal that reinforced the shared understanding of the space between them. Ethan, in turn, noted her composure and the precise control with which she navigated the lingering presence of observation, and he allowed a brief, almost imperceptible nod, acknowledging the mutual assessment and emerging intrigue that had defined their interactions throughout the evening. The city lights outside stretched endlessly, illuminating the ballroom and creating a sense of expansive context for their focused interaction, a visual reminder of the wider world beyond the confines of the gala and the contained intensity of their connection within it. They returned slowly to the main floor, moving past the sparse clusters of remaining guests, each aware of the subtle dynamics and silent negotiations of attention, presence, and assessment that had shaped the evening, the polished marble and fading chandelier light highlighting the elegance and precision of their interaction. Every measured word, every glance, every deliberate motion reinforced the quiet tension and awareness that had built over the course of the gala, forming a foundation for further engagement, observation, and the gradual deepening of a bond defined by respect, curiosity, and subtle fascination. Olivia and Ethan shared a final look as the ballroom emptied, the reflections of light on the marble floor capturing the gravity and intensity of the connection that had quietly emerged, an unspoken promise of encounters, challenges, and the slow, deliberate evolution of intrigue and attentiveness that would continue to shape their relationship beyond this evening. The night had deepened into a serene calm, the grand ballroom now nearly empty, leaving only the soft reflections of the chandeliers dancing across the marble floors and the faint echo of departing footsteps. Olivia Turner stood near a large window, the city lights sprawling endlessly beyond, casting a gentle glow on her thoughtful expression, the emerald green fabric of her dress shimmering subtly in the ambient light. Ethan Caldwell approached, his movements deliberate, precise, yet softened by the curiosity and fascination that had steadily built over the course of the evening. He stopped a measured distance behind her, allowing the space to respect both propriety and the unspoken tension that had been carefully cultivated, his gray eyes tracing her posture with quiet admiration. Olivia turned slightly to acknowledge his presence, a controlled smile and the subtle lift of her chin signaling attentiveness and confidence, the balance between engagement and self-possession perfectly maintained. The faint hum of residual music mingled with the soft clinking of glassware, creating a delicate backdrop that accentuated the significance of every glance, gesture, and pause shared between them. Ethan spoke first, his voice calm, articulate, and carefully measured, commenting on a subtle pattern of lights across the cityscape, each word chosen to invite reflection and engagement without imposition, and Olivia responded in kind, her sentences precise, insightful, and weighted with thoughtfulness, reinforcing the silent dialogue that had been developing through observation and presence. They moved slowly along the balcony, steps naturally aligned, a rhythm forming that spoke of growing mutual awareness, curiosity, and a quiet fascination threading between them. Olivia felt the intensity of the moment, a mix of anticipation, intrigue, and the understated recognition of Ethan's attention, and she allowed a fraction of a smile, a slight shift in posture, signaling acknowledgement while maintaining her independence. Ethan registered each subtle cue, every nuanced motion, noting her composure, poise, and perceptive awareness, qualities that distinguished her in a room defined by influence, expectation, and elegance, deepening his fascination in a manner restrained yet undeniable. The chandeliers overhead refracted light in soft golden patterns, emphasizing the contrast between the expansive room and the concentrated intimacy of their interaction, the interplay of presence, observation, and curiosity becoming a narrative in itself. Olivia and Ethan exchanged careful observations, each phrase weighted with meaning, each pause a silent measure of consideration and reflection, reinforcing the growing tension and the unspoken connection. As they returned toward the main floor, moving past the few remaining guests, the space around them seemed to bend, highlighting their gestures, their measured glances, and the precise cadence of their conversation. Every movement, every word, every glance reinforced the quiet rhythm of engagement and intrigue, laying a foundation for the deepening of curiosity, attention, and the subtle, deliberate emergence of a bond that promised to evolve in complexity and nuance. The fading echoes of the gala, the lingering reflections of light, and the soft ambient sounds of the space combined to frame this shared moment, allowing Olivia Turner and Ethan Caldwell to navigate their interaction with deliberate care, curiosity, and the quiet fascination that had begun to define the closing hours of the evening, setting the stage for the next chapters of awareness, understanding, and the slow, compelling development of connection. The ballroom had quieted completely, leaving only the soft, golden reflections of the chandeliers on the marble floor and the distant hum of city traffic through the expansive windows. Olivia Turner stood near the center, her posture calm, her hands lightly resting on the polished railing as she took in the serene emptiness of the space, the emerald shimmer of her dress catching the lingering light. Ethan Caldwell approached with measured, deliberate steps, his presence commanding yet tempered by the warmth and intrigue that had steadily grown between them over the evening. He stopped just a few feet away, allowing a respectful distance while maintaining a focused gaze that lingered on her with quiet fascination. Olivia met his eyes, a controlled, knowing smile curving her lips, signaling acknowledgement and engagement without diminishing her independence. The soft ambient echoes of the gala, combined with the gentle refracted light across the floors, created a delicate rhythm that underscored every glance, gesture, and word exchange between them. Ethan spoke first, his voice calm, precise, and carefully weighted, commenting on the subtle patterns of city lights beyond the window, his words meant to engage without imposing, inviting reflection and observation. Olivia responded with deliberate care, her sentences articulate, insightful, and measured, each phrase reinforcing the emerging dialogue of mutual attention and understanding. They moved slowly along the balcony, their steps almost instinctively aligned, forming a rhythm of presence, observation, and curiosity, the tension between them both controlled and undeniable. Olivia allowed herself a moment to notice the nuanced expressions in Ethan's eyes, the subtle shifts in posture, the careful modulation of tone, all of which conveyed attention, respect, and growing intrigue. Ethan, in turn, recognized her composure, poise, and perceptive awareness, qualities that distinguished her in a room defined by elegance, influence, and expectation, deepening his engagement in a restrained yet deliberate manner. The chandeliers above scattered soft, warm reflections across the marble, accentuating the contrast between the expansive space and the focused intimacy of their interaction. Their conversation continued, careful and deliberate, each word and pause loaded with significance, the silent dialogue of glances, gestures, and controlled responses weaving a narrative that neither had yet fully acknowledged aloud. As they returned to the main floor, moving past the few remaining clusters of guests, the space seemed to bend subtly around them, highlighting their measured movements and nuanced expressions, emphasizing the developing rhythm of connection, mutual curiosity, and attentive observation. Every subtle motion, every deliberate glance, every carefully chosen word reinforced the awareness, intrigue, and growing fascination threading between them, laying the groundwork for further encounters, deeper understanding, and the slow, deliberate evolution of their bond. The fading echoes of the gala, the soft ambient light, and the reflections dancing across the marble combined to frame this moment, allowing Olivia Turner and Ethan Caldwell to inhabit a shared space charged with awareness, consideration, and quiet fascination, setting the stage for the culmination of the evening and the beginnings of a deeper, intentional connection that neither could yet fully predict, but both were compelled to navigate. The final moments of the gala settled into a quiet serenity, the last hints of music fading into the distance as guests departed, and the soft golden glow of the chandeliers reflected across the polished marble floors. Olivia Turner stood near the expansive windows, the city lights stretching endlessly beyond, painting the skyline in a tapestry of brilliance that mirrored the subtle intensity of the evening. She breathed in slowly, feeling the calm after the orchestrated activity, and adjusted the delicate folds of her emerald green dress as her eyes followed Ethan Caldwell approaching from the side. His movements deliberate, each step measured with precision yet softened by the curiosity and engagement that had grown steadily throughout the night. He stopped a respectful distance from her, allowing the quiet to remain undisturbed while his gray eyes traced her profile, noting the composure, poise, and thoughtful awareness she carried effortlessly. Olivia turned to meet his gaze, her lips curving in a controlled, knowing smile, a subtle acknowledgement of the shared attention, curiosity, and mutual recognition that had been carefully built through the evening. The fading echoes of the gala, the soft reflections of the chandeliers, and the distant city sounds created a delicate, almost ethereal backdrop, emphasizing the significance of their presence, the weight of observation, and the subtle fascination threading between them. Ethan spoke with measured clarity, his voice calm and precise, commenting on a detail in the cityscape beyond the window, each word carefully chosen to invite reflection and interaction without dominance. And Olivia responded with equal deliberation, her sentences articulated, thoughtful, and weighted with intent, reinforcing the silent dialogue that had developed through glances, posture, and subtle gestures. They moved together along the balcony, their steps almost instinctively aligned, the rhythm of presence, awareness, and quiet engagement flowing naturally between them, each moment reinforcing the unspoken acknowledgement of mutual respect and growing intrigue. Olivia felt the subtle tension and anticipation that had built throughout the evening, the awareness of being observed with careful attention, and she allowed a fraction of a smile, a slight adjustment in posture, signaling acknowledgement while maintaining control over her space and composure. Ethan, in turn, registered every nuanced expression, every subtle motion, noting the intelligence, grace, and quiet authority that Olivia projected in a room defined by elegance and expectation, and he allowed a minimal, precise nod, acknowledging the evolving connection and fascination that had grown between them. The soft golden light continued to dance across the marble floor, accentuating the contrast between the expansive space and the focused intimacy of their interaction, highlighting the deliberate attention, subtle gestures, and layered observations that defined their dynamic. Their conversation remained calm, deliberate, and nuanced, each word and pause weighted with significance, each glance and gesture reinforcing the rhythm of curiosity, attention, and emerging connection that had quietly formed. As they turned toward the exit together, moving past the emptied tables and lingering reflections of light, the ballroom seemed to hold its breath, framing their interaction with an elegance that emphasized the deliberate, careful, and subtle evolution of their bond. Every measured movement, glance, and exchange contributed to a quietly compelling rhythm of engagement, awareness, and intrigue, creating a foundation for further encounters and deeper connection. The city beyond the windows stretched like a promise, and in that luminous backdrop, Olivia Turner and Ethan Caldwell shared a final look, an unspoken acknowledgement of curiosity, respect, and fascination, marking the culmination of the evening and the beginning of a new chapter in a connection defined by awareness, subtlety, and the promise of deliberate, evolving engagement.